We're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Craig from MyBizGuide, wellness advocate, and the business of being human, growth modality, and also book that I'm working on. Tonight's topic is what is ego? And for all these workshops that we do, it's always, oh, what am I going to do for next workshop? And by the way, we do them every other week, every other Friday, unless it's vacation, then then we'll skip around a little bit. And so it's kind of random. And actually, this topic is not in the book. A lot of topics are not in the upcoming book. I have them for upcoming books after the initial book, Business of Being Human. I think this ego is going to go into the book after that, and the tentative title is Deconstructing Oppression. And you'll probably see why. Ego, I have notes that I've taken over the years. So I have a concept for a workshop. And actually, I have a lot of prefab workshops that are bigger that I'm working on. These that I'm doing for the Zoom group and for the live Facebook group, a lot of times they're just kind of from the hip, and they might be parts from the book. They might be something from what's going on now in our species, or something else. So anyways, I research my notes, and a lot of times I get 15 to 25 results from searching my old notes, which I have 400 pages, I think. But ego had 105 mentions. So that was pretty good. And actually, ego had 105 mentions in my notes. What were some other ones that had a lot of mentions? Hey, Shante, how's it going?
Good evening. Good.
Good. Yeah, ego had a lot of mentions. Balance had a lot of mentions. Challenge, I think, had the most mentions. Challenge had like 270 some odd mentions. And what did we do? Which one did we do last time? What did we do
Was
last
it
time?
Sick Society?
Wellness
Wellness?
in a Sick Society. Yeah, wellness had a lot of mentions. And Gray here, Griselda, is my trusty co-advocate and co-host. Helps me keep track of a lot of these things. And so introductions there. So ego. So what is ego? I think that the classic context that we hear it is the bravado, and the bravado and the I guess I don't want to get too deep into it right now, but the narcissistic, that kind of thing, that classic kind of better than the other person or thinks too highly of themselves kind of ego. But then there's another part of the ego that I really like, and it's really an important part to understand, and that's the part that Ekhardt Tolle has talked about and made popular, and that's the false self part of the ego. So when I talk about ego, I talk about want without context. So in egocentric pursuits, because if we think about, sorry, going to try and dial in my technology here a little bit. That's a little bit better. There we go. If we think about it, egocentric, want without context. We want something, but how does that affect us long term? And how does it affect the things around us long term? Probably some of the best examples, of that are when we say ego, egocentric pursuits, things that are people want in the moment, but not really the best long-term thing. And we can think about environmental trespass is an important example of that. Dams come to mind. People think as a collective, people think, oh, I want this. We want electricity. We want technology to grow and keep pursuing technology for the sake of technology, but without recognizing environmental impact. So that's an important part of that want without context. Egocentric pursuits always trespass on truth, including one's own energetic recognition of self. And if we talk about narcissism, scarcity mindset, narcissism, the first person that narcissist isn't listening to is themselves. So the scarcity mindset, narcissism, ego, all those things are really, um, really intertwined. The narcissist, so to go back, the narcissism, trespassing on themselves, not listening to their own energetic imprint, not listening to their own inclinations and things that we're adept at, this individuality. Instead of going to introspect, narcissist, a little bit of a review here, narcissist will try to manipulate the field around them to provide to reflect a false narrative. And that always comes along with materialistic things in contemporary society. So scarcity mindset, narcissism, colonialism, capitalism. Probably a lot of you heard me talk about these things on the regular. If you're new, then now you know. These are these are the things that I talk about, the usual. Bear with me while I get started here. So as I was doing the research for this, it dawned on me that this thing we call ego, is a really important part of understanding this scarcity mindset, narcissism, colonialism, capitalism. And that ego, that want without context, is a huge part of understanding narcissism and a huge part of understanding disconnect in contemporary society in general. And, we always get to this part, right? This is about wellness. So we're talking about individual wellness and societal wellness, because the society is always going to reflect the mass of the individuals. So it's not that it's a societal problem without individuals involved, right? People have a tendency to say, oh, society this, and look at things as if they're not involved. If we were going to do a psychological profile of a lot of people in contemporary society, they say, oh, well, society's doing this, without including their part in that society. But to understand society that we're in, right? And here's the balance, and here's where this interconnection, to understand the society in. And then the last workshop was wellness in a sick society. Well, what's the cure? How do we have cohesive society? That's all going to get back to the mirror and understanding ourselves and understanding our individual attributes and our frailties, and this scarcity mindset. The beginning of this, again, scarcity mindset, narcissism, colonialism, capitalism. The beginning of scarcity mindset, I think, is naturally occurring frailty, because we have to have challenge. And this naturally occurring frailty within us is a natural part of our makeup that encourages introspect. Okay, so here's where it comes back around, where the narcissist is ignoring their introspect and trespassing on themselves first and filling that void with everything except for what goes there. And then we get into the addiction, and we've had the workshop lessons from addiction. So we've got the introspect and connecting with ourself, connecting with our own individuality. That's what grows a healthy, cohesive society in cultures, because the more individual we are, the more we mesh with everybody else, and everyone brings their individual values to the collective. When we don't have those individual values, when we don't connect with our true individual self, we're not able to bring value to the table. When people are doing their false self, or the facade, or creating the facade, which is narcissism 101, they're not truly contributing, because, and don't forget, we're talking on an energetic level first an energetic level. The egocentric pursuits, that ego, it's another parallel for that ego is the entitlement. And that entitlement factor, if we look at ego, we look at that basic character of entitlement that expects things, and that expects the world to kind of revolve around them. And then we can see that reflection in contemporary society, colonial society, that expectation. So even though we're in a natural ecosystem, that trespasses on that natural ecosystem. Ego and the false sense of hierarchy. In a relationship with narcissists, there's always that hierarchy. And that hierarchy, if we look at, again, colonial societies, colonial governments, back into the kings and queens and this kind of thing, there's a hierarchy, not to be confused with individuals that are more adept than other individuals, because we fit together that way. Sure, everybody, that old adage, like everybody's good at something. So if everybody's good at what they're good at, then we fit together and we trade that. So that's an important aspect of transcending that ego, to understand. And building understanding around these concepts is kind of the core of everything that I do, and I call it cognitive growth and healing. But to add context and understanding to these concepts, so we can start saying, okay, here's some reasons why individuality is important, and here's some reflections of this thing called ego, and here's where ego connects to narcissism, colonialism, capitalism. Here's where ego connects to entitlement. Here's where ego connects to addiction. Now, that false self that Ekhardt Tolle talks about, that false self, manufacturing the false self and relating to the false self, is another huge key part to understanding ego and human behavior, especially in contemporary society. So back to scarcity mindset, right? Where everyone's got scarcity mind, everyone's got human frailty, and that part where, oh, am I good enough? Can I do this? And we either grow to those challenges, understand that, maybe we have other attributes, whatever, or ignore it. And that's the key delineation between being on a good path, a productive path of growth and wellness, and spiraling into narcissism, addiction, entitlement, colonialism, capitalism, this sort of thing. But we've all got that human frailty. And again, I think if we look at if we look at how the universe works, if we look at some natural clues that challenge us, we have to have challenge. And that challenge of introspect and doing the introspect is a key thing. So the human frailty is, in essence, a teacher, and it's challenging us. Now, if we don't address our introspect, if we don't address our own individual shortcomings, if you will, or frailties, then that's where we get that made up part. And that's where I was saying earlier is where the narcissist, growing from scarcity mindset into narcissism, that narcissism isn't actually engaging with its own shortcomings or lackings, or however you want to put that, but instead builds this facade, builds this false narrative that they are, in fact, quote unquote, okay, up to par. Of course, if we start to understand more about human species and human behavior, it gets more clear why all these things don't work and why they don't fit together. So the person we call narcissist starts to build this facade instead of going inwards and working on their own introspect and personal development. They build this facade that would create the narrative that they don't have any work to do, that they're okay. Well, again, if we know how things work, everybody's got work to do. Challenge is inevitable. Challenge is a part of life. Challenge is a critical part of life. The challenge of life and death facilitates life. Life is growth. We have to engage in challenge. So seeing the things from the narcissist perspective, from that psychological profile of narcissist, we can see that totally, the boat is completely missed right off the bat by not engaging with the introspect and not working on our personal development. And, a lot of that has to do with understanding. So understanding, ooh, why do I feel this way? What are my insecurities? Right? So to ignore that, we create this facade. The narcissist creates the facade that I don't have any insecurities, which, not true, right? This is what we're saying. This is the facade. And that's a lie. Just like any lie, there takes constant effort to uphold that lie. So the narcissist has to keep growing and growing this facade, right? And then we all know this part about a lie. A lie gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it keeps growing, and it sucks all our energy too. So when we're not doing our introspect, and we don't grow, when we do our introspect, we face our fears, we grow that self-confidence based on at least understanding, maybe not even that, we are adept at something, but at least we understand that we're on the path of growing, of learning about ourselves, of learning, hey, you know what, this is something that I'm not super good at, but I'm better at something over here, so on and so forth. Anyways, narcissism perpetuates this cycle of creating this facade. And this is the part where, a lot of people are, in fact, perpetuating narcissistic behavior. To use this term and understand, we're in a society that has a lot of disconnect. So of course, even though, yeah, we're wellness advocates, but expect that since we're from this society, since we're in contemporary society, we're still going to be prone to perpetuating these things. But to understand them helps us alleviate that a little bit and do a better job about not trespassing on other people, and especially ourselves. So is a narcissistic mindset, continues to build this facade. That's that ego, and that's what Ekhardt Tolle calls that false self. So it's building that facade, and especially again in contemporary society, where there's so much against introspect, where there's so much pressure against um, being individuals, really. It's hard to, all the people that are the most individuals are the ones that really struggle with peer pressure and bullying and that kind of thing, and the whole not fitting in. um, Ever since we're, little kids, that whole thing is just really, it's for sure that's a whole nother level of challenge. So it's understandable how people would start to build facades, even people that are really that like themselves and like themselves as an individual. Still, we build facade just because contemporary society is such a pain in the ass to be a real person in, is the short version. But as people build these facades, and the more facade someone builds, you can see where the more likely they're going to get stuck into a deeper mess, right? We've all had to, kind of tone it down a little bit here, there, that sort of thing. But that's a difference between that and someone that's full blown narcissist just based off the facade, right? And this is the thing where we can communicate, and since we know each other, since we know people, we know, okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah, we've all had to, watch our swearing, or not say certain words, or just kind of meter ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. Um, and that's a whole big part of the introspect, is understanding, okay, how I feel versus how I think versus how I act versus the context that all these things are happening in. And that's an ongoing conversation um, with ourself. So yeah, Shantae, go ahead.
So I just wanted to add something. Uh, it, this topic is just, it's very, I guess it's, how would you say it in a good, it's basically like, it brings you back to humble beginnings. This morning, I was just thinking about that. Like, I'm not from, I'm not, I guess I'm not used to living in the cities per se, maybe smaller towns, but being involved in a whole different society and the way set of mind or the way they think has like gotten to me. So this morning I called an elder back home, and he just reminded me how the things that you were just talking about, it comes full circle, but we still have to remember the to remain humble, because if and to pray, because then we can get caught up in life, we can get caught up in all the problems and all the ways, and the sick minds and people not having morals and values, and especially when you don't have that tioshwe around you consistently. And
Hmm.
I just felt like, it just basically what he's saying is just remember who you are, where you come from, because there's going to be so much things going on that you might forget who you are, and then you get caught up in talking like this or that. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I was like, yeah, you're right. I said, he reminded me this much. And it was just those little tiny things give, that give us strength as a whole. Oyate, and is a, and I was just so thankful that it was just so simple, but I was making it so like, you know what I mean? Like right now, it's
Yeah.
like I don't know how to say it. It's just a way of
No,
life.
that's 100%, is don't get caught up in the false narratives
Hmm.
and colonialism, false narrative 101.
Yeah. So that's.
Americana, false narrative 101. Like those things are, addiction,
Hmm.
chasing, what do they say, trivial pursuits, chasing those things. And then this is, yeah, don't do that. And, part of that humility is keeping our own counsel and keeping connection to ourself. And then, that, like the classic part from Socrates, is to be truly knowledgeable, we first must know that we know nothing. And I think that that's a big kind of teaching that we always keep in our mental ecosystem to keep us on level. And, you know, we're sharing ideas, we're sharing concepts, but that's, you know, that's a foundational one, is that humility. And that's a real, but that is the exact parallel. And thanks for sharing that, because yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what where we're starting is, I'm, you know, taking the long way to say that that's, you know, it's an easy thing to get caught up in. And I think we started this conversation earlier about boundaries, and that's this boundaries between, you know, us and collective, and understand the difference between boundaries and walls, and understand we also have to give back. We're not separated from everything else. Takiasi, we're all here together, but to keep our own, to keep connected to ourself is a huge part of that, and that humility, because it's really easy to spiral downhill, and to get caught up in false narratives. And I think probably all of us have at least felt that when, you know, we were in school, in high school, you know, or younger, or a little bit older. And man, like, oh, you got to fit in, you got to fit in, you got to fit in. And like, oh, these are the cool kids, and you know, I'm not the cool kid, and this whole dichotomy there. Um, so yeah, but you know, what we do in the present is creating our future self. So we're laying the foundation for our future self right now. So that's an important part of introspect and personal development, and our growth. What we're doing right now is our next steps. That's creating ourself, and ourself meaning how we process our understanding. So the typical narcissistic mindset narcissist is perpetuating these false narratives, not connecting to self, and that keeps spiraling and spiraling. And so people start relating to themselves in the false narrative context, in the ego, because the lie keeps taking more and more energy, right? That's energy we're giving that false narrative. We're giving energy to the delusion instead of our introspect, instead of our growth. And we don't have enough energy for both. Not to mention if we have day jobs. So, you know, we all should have like two or three of us just to keep on top of everything. Whole nother ball of wax. We've all got limited resources and energy. You know, this part, energy is our first currency. So, and that's the business of being human 101. Energy is our first currency. So first thing, we have to give energy to ourself and to our own path. And where's our energy going? Where's our energy going? What's the ROI? What's the return on our investment for our energy output? So if our energy output's going to a false self, that's not really a good investment. And here's the catch. Here's the big catch, is because people spend so much time putting energy into that false self, that that's what they think their self really is, right? Because it takes up so much, and we get used to that. So we get used to that lie. And you've heard the term, people start to believe their own bullshit. I think that's the best way that I can think to articulate that. But especially starting from a young age, and being immersed in a culture that is basically built on lies and addiction and false self. Super easy for people to get stuck in this egocentric pursuit, in this development of the ego, this growing of the ego. But then when people start to look into their wellness, I have one of my workshops is called Making Wellness Stick. And the core thing is making sure that we're not trying to put real information, real growth on top of uh, the illusion of a foundation, because that ego is not real. It's a facade. So it doesn't hold the things, it doesn't hold reality, right? It's a facade. And when we talk about uh, delusion and psychosis. So actually, it's a psychosis to think that keeping the delusion up is a sustainable venture. So, of course, someone would have to think and do some actual objective thought processing to get that way. But, we're doing that. So understanding our species, understanding human behavior. So this is a big part of it is people say, oh man, I'm doing all this wellness stuff. I'm reading all these things. I'm going to these workshops, but it's still not sticking. The first thing I look for is, well, what's your foundation? Are you really connecting to yourself, or are you connected to a facade? Now, the next part, because there's always more, right? Trauma response. So when we have trauma response, now this includes everyone that's not just the stereotypical narcissist, right? The trauma response is also, needing to get away from our true self. So then we get away from our true self because that's where the pain is, that's where the trauma happened, and we build an ego. We build an alternate identity outside of ourself. So this is something that we have to realize what's going on. And so then we can start to, okay, here's what I built. Here's the false self that I built. And again, in trauma response, it's understandable. It's like, get away from the situation, get away from ourselves, get away from the pain, of course. But, these are all cycles, and it's all understanding our species and on an individual level. So that's the next part, is the people that have built this false self, this ego, in terms of Ekhardt Tolle's version. And I'm crediting him because that's just the way I know it. I don't know how accurate that is, but he's the one that made it popular. So it's super important that when we say trauma bonding, a lot of that trauma bonding is to the false self, that sense of security that is not reality, because the reality is painful, right? Super, super critical thing to understand when we've had trauma, when we've had to get away from the pain in our true self and had to make a separate self, right? Which makes, it's a natural, it's a natural thing that happened, It's not like stereotypical narcissist where, oh, just not doing my homework, just not doing my introspect, that kind of thing. A lot of people want to do um have that understanding of introspect and core self, but also this is the cognitive growth and healing part, and hopefully it's easier to look at it from a human development standpoint, from a if you will, a scientific standpoint, to look at these factors that affect human behavior as a species. And this is what I say, I'll lighten it up a little bit for a second. This is the business of being human, to look at ourselves as a business, to look at ourselves as, look, this is what happens in these different situations. This is what happens with ourselves when there's a trauma response. There's a natural tendency to go and get away from ourselves and build a separate self, but it's not the core self. So as we grow, and then, okay, I've been running away from myself. When we understand that I've been running away from myself, and this even happens with what I'll say medicine people. All the medicine people, literally all the medicine people I've known have run away from themselves because their self was too big, was too overwhelming. And then to realize we can't run away from ourselves and then start coming back and start that healing process. But it's important to understand the part of us that we relate to that was the runaway part, and the part that was the challenging part. Um, so that's, the creating awareness of these things that we go through as humans is important. And a lot of it's not going to be, well, it's not going to be easy, and some challenges are easier than others. I think this ego thing and understanding where we're reflecting, or projecting, trauma or narcissism or or colonialism or whatever part of that thing, um, it's just important to give ourselves that space to understand ourselves, right? And this is the part of the introspect and regrowing ourselves, regrowing our true self, and spending that time with ourselves where we couldn't before. So this is the part to come back and say, okay, we were in a reactive state, in a reactive compulsive state, and we weren't able to bond with our core self, and we weren't old enough, we weren't mature enough, whatever happened, where we didn't have a foundation built with our core self. So now is the time to come back, where that cycle brings us back around and points us to our core self. um so I've got some notes here. So important to understand, boundaries, right? I mean, this is the part where, in natural flow of things, this is the part to understand the importance of boundaries, to grow boundaries with, with our past and with society in the present, because society in the present is still, very egocentric, very immersed in egocentric pursuits, and addiction at the cost of everything else, including itself first, right? Addiction, the addict is, in essence, disregarding its own well-being and taking everything else with it. So, there's colonialism in a nutshell. Well, guess what? We're all affected by that. We all have to pay taxes. We all have to make money. We all have jobs. We all have to, drive cars and use the electricity that dams create. And and obey the laws, whether or not we agree with them. So, and look at the clock and be places in clock time. So, back to that one, printed currency, written law, and clocks. That's all part of an egocentric system. So, all these things that we're immersed in, we need to understand and grow boundaries, understand where they come from, and how are we not perpetuating that, right? And isn't that one of the first things when we start to address our trauma? For me, it was the first one of the key factors for me to start addressing my trauma is that I didn't want to perpetuate it on other people. Now, it's not because I was a good person then, it's because I didn't want to look like an idiot. It's because I had so much pride. you know, I didn't want to, I didn't want to come off the handle. I didn't want to come unglued. It made me look like I didn't have control over my emotions. And of course I didn't, but that was one of the things when I saw myself coming unglued, for people that may or may not have any idea what I was mad about or talking about, or whatever myriad of issues. That was one of the key things that started me on my real introspect journey, is that, oh shit, I need to, what's going on with me? Why am I reacting like this? And then of course that's that, what we call that compulsive reactive versus conscious responsive, some other key words. So in all this, we're turning our compulsive reactive into conscious responsive. So as we grow and we understand and we add context to these human behavior concepts and these human behaviors, that's more, we're growing our foundation. So we understand, oh, here's human behavior, here's the narcissist, right? We deal with narcissistic system, egocentric system, people that just want what they want regardless of anything else. If we can understand that psychological profile, we can speak to it better. Also, we can see it within ourselves. When we see it within ourselves and we're not perpetuating it, then we're less likely to enable it in others, right? So I think we've all had these conversations with, well, I'll say stereotypic narcissists, and I'll say it in the context of environmental activism, in the context of dams. This is my hot topic, right? Because I've come from a background of fisheries, forestry, wildlife. So an intact ecosystem is what we've got to understand. And all these natural sciences clearly point to needing intact ecosystems. Yet you go on a whatever, Facebook page or wherever the conversation about dams, and there's people, displaying this egocentric mentality of want without context. And it's always, well, we need electricity. We need electricity. Human life's not worth, human life's more valuable than the fish. What would you rather have, fish or electricity? And it's not about that. It's about understanding ecosystems, but the people are looking at wants without context. And their wants don't even align up with their own best interest, not to mention the species' best interest, not to mention the planetary best interest. But the alleviation for egocentric is mitaku you see, to understand the connection to everything on a non-hierarchical level, without the delusion of hierarchy, that we're all interconnected and that taking care of everything else is automatically taking care of our species. Then we just know, oh, if we take care of the salmon, we're going to be taken care of. If we take care of the river, we're going to be taken care of. If we take care of the birds, we're going to be taken care of, because these are the core essentials to life. And I always tell people that the wants is that people are misunderstanding their wants for needs, and they're sacrificing necessities for luxuries. And that's a key component. People will and are, and this is, welcome to America. And, I say America, but it's all colonial societies, colonialism in general, sacrificing the whole planet, everything around them, future generations of everything, future generations of their own species, their own children, their own grandchildren, for ideologies, for what they want, with their want floating out in thin air without context of anything, literally. So, that's where we're at. And when I first started really getting to the core of these things and in depth, it's like, well, yeah, it's going to be that deep, because the species is killing its own habitat. It's got to be some deep understanding. It's got to be some powerful stuff going on. But our only way out of that is by understanding and unraveling it. And I pointed to earlier, the next book is got the working title Deconstructing Oppression. And this is how it goes with the scarcity mindset, to the narcissism, to the colonialism, to the capitalism, and to the ego, and seeing that ego in both the bravado and the false self. So, what is ego? There's another part to ego. See, I have human frailty. This technology is just bothering me. I want my light in between this setting and the next setting. But the other part of ego is what we've heard a lot, the dissolving ego, right? Dissolving ego. Okay, well, dissolving ego, we kind of already went through it because people build up this false ego and then start their wellness journey and start to stack their wellness efforts on top of this false self, on top of this ego. So, and again, pointing to Ekhardt Tolle, you have to get rid of the ego in order for the wellness efforts to stick, right? So basically, we've lived a lie. Now we got to undo the lie and start over. So I think this is going to be a common narrative with everyone. There's a common narrative with our species. We went a long way out of our way with detrimental implications and didn't accomplish anything. Other than a lot of horrible side effects. So everyone that's building this false ego, whether semi-intentionally or through their denial of their introspect, or in their core inclinations and their core character, denying our core character, good, bad, or ugly. And then the people that have gone through trauma, that have just basically, abandoned self, to, use these words and try to paint a picture of what's going on in our core. The people who have gone through trauma, that have had to abandon themselves and escape that pain and start somewhere else. I think there's lots of parallels. I think there's lots of parallels to that in the physical, where people have been displaced and want to come home, but they can't because they've been forced away from their home and had to make a home in an area that wasn't quite as nice. And then there's a part where, wow, that's our new home, and then this is back to the trauma bonding part. Trauma bonding with our ego, because we've put a lot of effort into it. A lot of people have lived lies their whole life and are still connected to that. So here's another really important thing to understand about the trauma bonding. And am I bonding to the false self, and why? But to understand that, and this is the part where we can reverse engineer what's going on and look why, right? Why do I have this bond? Is it just because I've put effort into this thing? Because I spent my whole life putting effort into a sinking ship, right? And when we talk about Americana, a lot of people have done the Pledge of Allegiance their whole life. So, here's the part to understand: when we're trying to help people disengage from linear mindset, when we're trying to help people to grow through addiction, these are things that they've connected to. And Americana, contemporary narrative, the flag, religion, Christianity, for one. We could name just about any of them, but these are things that a lot of people have spent their whole life with this attachment, with this security blanket, and actually a false security blanket, because it hasn't been facilitating their own growth and understanding. And that's a big key to understand the difference between wellness and sickness. Is wellness is always going to be facilitating our own growth, and sickness and delusion is not. sicknesses. The ideologies are always going to be quick fix. And, there's a parallel to addiction, that word fix. So all ideologies are always going to be the quick fix. And refresher, the words work and serious. Introspect is always going to seem like work. It's always going to fall under that word work, even though introspect is a totally opposite end of the spectrum from involuntary servitude, flipping burgers at McDonald's to barely pay rent. Totally different things, but they're still going to be translated as work. So important thing, again, refresher midstream here, is don't be afraid of work. Make sure if you're picking up an energetic signal from something as you're translating, make sure you're not just taking the contemporary narrative of work is bad and applying it to your own personal development. So dissolving ego, and we're talking about separating people from their trauma bonds with the delusions that they've invested so much life into, so much energy in their life. Interesting situation, talking about personal development and psychology and psychedelics. So how the classic psychedelics work is it gets rid of delusion. Well, some of them get rid of delusion. Boom, just take the delusion away. Now, if someone has only grown up with delusion in colonial society, with the job, with all the delusions, right? And we're a construct of society, then you're taking away everything. And so there's that big part of anxiousness along with losing that. And then sometimes that's a sticking point in working with psychedelics, where people, it's like, you say you want to get rid of and dissolve your ego, but do you really? Because that's going to be like just about every single thing that you know. And as a matter of fact, when I started pulling my own self apart when I was 16, 17, I realized that by the time I took everything out of myself that I didn't personally approve of, there wasn't even a me left. How's that for interesting? Everything I knew, everything that I was packing along, the idea I had of me upon closer examination wasn't me at all. I was harboring contemporary narrative. I had this facade to blend in, and I had been doing this facade since I was a kid, because you got to blend in, right? So while I'm spending my energy blending in, right, and this is I'm using myself, but this psychological profile for everybody, we're using our energy to blend in. We're not giving that energy to ourself, to growing this connection with ourself, which is the sustainable, true self. So yeah, I'm 17, and I start going, shit, because I started really well, I was questioning a lot of things way before then, but then they started hitting home to where I was like, wow, I'm perpetuating these things, and I literally took myself apart piece by piece, long drawn out process through many, many years. But good process, and something I still am committed to, saying, oh, wow, this isn't mine. This is from my dad. This is from my mom. This is from my sister. This is from the government. This is from religion. This is from my friend Joe. This is from that one guy we partied with 3 years ago. All the shit that I was keeping wasn't even in line with how I truly felt. And a lot of times, because what I truly felt didn't fit with any narratives that I saw. And I sure don't consider myself Democrat or Republican, but those things don't fit with anything that I understand to be true. Uh, and you know, for most of you know me, I sure don't consider myself to be even American because those values aren't anything that I align with. Frankly, I don't even like to consider myself human because most of those people are shitheads too. But to put what but see to put ourselves in a position where we're unconstrained by existing narratives is critical. And we have to, that's kind of funny, huh? Griselda's laughing. Um, we have to have a truly free, objective understanding of around, what's going on around us and in us, because we're connected to everything, right? Again, Takiasi. But to be able to say no, no to everything. It's like, no, not apple, cherry, strawberry, chocolate, vanilla, pistachio, none of those. None of those and no combination of those really resonates with me. And to be able to sit there in that place of um in that place of self and to have confidence is the closest word, and it's not a word I like really, but maybe comfort or poignance that with connecting to our true self, no matter what that ends up being, is going to be the best thing. Scarcity mindset and the quick fix wants to blend in, wants to connect. But I think that's where that parallel comes in, is just because you're thirsty doesn't mean you drink the poison. And it's definitely a big meditation to grow that boundary with whatever's around us so that we don't sacrifice ourselves, so we don't um, give a diluted version of ourselves just so we can have some comfort with whatever's around us. I think that's an important thing because that's the only way that we can make change happen, is to be strong as an individual and to take the time and to explain, well, it's not left, it's not right, it's none of those things. So that dissolving, and then, in that, what I just said is dissolving ego within itself, because that ego, that want to fit in, or that want to tone ourselves down or to dumb ourselves down to fit in, that's not really in everything's best interests. Because back to the beginning of the program, our true individuality is where we have the best value. And even as outliers, remember this part, the outliers have the biggest effect on the average. So to be comfortable being an outlier and to be comfortable contributing something different to the collective is super, super critical. So understanding ego, dissolving that ego, understanding that want without context, really, are we taking literally everything into consideration? And when we start to align, when we start to do our wellness, when we start to understand how we actually function, all of our instinct, our objective thought process, our emotional intelligence, our ancestral wisdom, all four of those things, right? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, instinct, objective mental, objective thought process, emotional intelligence, spiritual ancestral wisdom. All of those things start to sync up, and then we're flowing, then we're in alignment, then the law of attraction kicks in. We can feel that we're on our own path with a capital P. So that's where that, understanding and having the longer conversations about human behavior, personal development, psychology, sociology. I think, going into the future with our species, like everyone will know all this, and these conversations are critical. And the more conversations like this we have, we exchange ideas, and that is contributing to the cure. That is contributing to the solution. All the human species problems, all our problems as humans are human centric. The elk isn't causing our problems. The birds aren't causing our problems. The grass aren't causing our problems. The rocks aren't causing problems. Tree aren't. It's all human centric. And what part of the human? Because people say, "Oh, people did this," but are you talking about an action that the human did? Because after that physical action happened, it's too late. It's all within the mental, emotional, spiritual profile of the human, because all those things happen first, and then there's a physical action. So again, contemporary society puts people in jail because of a physical action, and there's no proactive. So important aspect of understanding humanity and human behavior. And let's not be reactive, right? And then we're back to the reactive compulsive versus conscious responsive and proactive. Let's be proactive. Let's understand why people do these behaviors. Why do we not have a cohesive society? So let's see here. I've got some notes here. Does anyone have anything? Did you want to interject at this time? Anyone? So I've got my notes. Usually I shoot from the hip for a while and then go through the notes. Oh, do I miss anything? Um, okay, I'll proceed then. Um, Dissolving ego, like we were talking about, that's a parallel to addiction, like we talked about, and trauma bonding. People trauma bonded to their ego, to their alter ego, to their alter identity, to the false self, to that false narrative. Well, that trauma bond, I mean, that's addiction too. It's just another form of addiction. So understand, when we're doing that, not only with others, but with ourselves first, it's the same rules for addiction. First of all, be nice, especially to yourself. Be nice to yourself, because this is like, trauma bonding is the same as like taking a crack pipe away from a crack addict when they're in mid hit. It, it it's that's traumatizing in itself. You're pulling someone's security blanket away, right? Scarcity mindset. This all comes back to scarcity mindset, right? Narcissism, fear-based mindset, scarcity mindset. So people are scared anyway. So even though you might be trying to do something good, it still needs to be done. There's still technique involved, right? And personal development and wellness, there's an art to it. And there's certain way things work and a certain way things don't work. And breaking a bond right away, sometimes that's the way to do it. Sometimes people cold turkey Other times it's more cycles and takes more time. So understand that parallel between letting go of ego and letting go of trauma bonds and addiction in the classic sense with substance abuse. So, these same things, and when we're going through it with ourselves, and this is the part that I think that people who have had experience with substance abuse have the best platform going forward to understand other forms of addiction without substance abuse, or addiction without physical substance, addiction to ideologies, the classic Americana, colonial narratives, um, addiction to government money clocks, trying to solve our problems that way, and to understand quick fix mentality, um, to understand anxiousness around quitting. If we're challenging everything that we grew up with, there's anxiousness there, because that not knowing is very scary, right? And so this is understanding. So if we add understanding, then that is reducing our anxiety. So understanding, we have so much understanding, helps us grow that foundation. Oh, and I'll do that thing that we do, that one thing that we do that one time. Understanding, that thing I say all the time. What do I say all the time at the beginning of this?
The seed,
Bear with me.
sun.
The seed, the water, the soil. Understanding is the soil, an idea is the seed, intention is the water, action is the sunlight. So let's add some understanding and intention to this concept. So we're always adding seed, adding soil, adding understanding, and then intention to intention, pay attention, resonate with these concepts, let these concepts, into our ecosystem if they make sense to you. If these things resonate, and keep them alive and nurture them, and then that's the seed. These concepts are seeds. If you want them in your ecosystem, give intention to them, let them germinate, or maybe it resonates with another way that you see these things, or something else, and maybe it connects to another teaching that we had too. And it's that healthy mental ecosystem is always what we're doing. Don't forget that place of ego is that trickster teacher, and that naturally occurring human frailty is pointing us back to ourselves. All these things, what I see, all our human frailty is pointing us back to introspect and pointing us back to individuality. And like we said, before in this workshop, the individuality is where we contribute best to society. And the more individual, the more diversity that we have, the more value we bring through uniqueness and different lenses and different attributes and everything. That's how we naturally mesh. So that's how society functions, not to be confused with contemporary societies that have this narrative of, everyone being the same and thinking the same, and the same religions and the same ideologies. So understand that frailty is that, that's our teacher. We have these challenges, all these things are challenges, and embracing challenge. We're all, it's all learning, it's all growing. Where's my ego hiding? Easy one. Perpetuating Americana, materialism, government money clock, quick fixes versus deeper introspect and understanding. That want, the first word to explain it is want. the want to get through this conversation. That's ego. That's the quick fix. The want to. Go ahead.
Can I interject? Sorry.
Sure.
You know, I really like how Ram Dass says in the Seva Foundation in 1985, he says, "Oh, it hurts. It hurts. Good. That shows me where that secret stash of attachment is, where that secret stash of dukkha is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where's your secret ego? It's where it hurts."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Good interjection. Thanks for that.
I like that.
Ram Dass is another good one. We can reverse engineer that. What's the place that we're afraid of? That's where it is. The place in ourselves that we're afraid of, that's where we need to go. So we're simple. We're not that difficult to figure out. As a matter of fact, I think that I've heard Ram Dass say that that concept of God, which I don't like that word, but I understand he's using it like that, is closer than our jugular. So our solutions are closer than we think. People are looking out here for solutions when it's the introspect, when it's a deeper introspect. And isn't that, that's basically echoing what we've been saying. It's people looking at trying to fix society. Well, inward. Everything points back to inward. And we've all got that. We've all got that same makeup. We've all got the same whiteboard to work on. We've all got the same, outline of the challenge area, no, in here. So I've got a couple notes here from my writings. It's only ego that fights for separation between self and everything, much to the demise of the individual. That speaks a lot to, insecurity. There's no running away from everything. There's no running away from our species. Oh yeah, Griselda just posted that little kind of natural parallel to that. But that's a trauma response, right? How many people here, see memes in our, we're all Facebook friends here. I mean, most of us, how many people see memes or have the concept of running away to go live in the woods, by myself or just a few other people? That's a trauma response. That's a trauma response to contemporary society, So, but we know that. But if we understand nature and we truly understand our connection to everything, then everything else is like, no, you people got to fix your people, right? So there's all kinds of lessons in that and that give back component. If we have the potential, humans are the ones that are responsible for solving the human-centric problems and not perpetuating our human trauma on everything else. So again, transcending the humans to where we're, if the other animals, if the other beings on this planet are truly, our equals, well, and our relatives and our relations that we appreciate, admire, and need, let's act like that. Let's try and find solutions for our human species. So we're not trespassing on the other beings. And that works a million different ways. Chasing the delusions of freedom is a direct result of ego-induced psychosis, trying to ignore the natural connections of life. And it's funny how that word ignore and ignorance are very similar. The ego doesn't want to understand reality. It's too hard sometimes, and ego is lazy. Ego doesn't try to actually understand and meditate on how everything fits together. Ego wants freedom from this concept called life. Choose natural connections and growth instead of a government allotment of delusions. A lot of times in contemporary society, you hear the word freedom. But if you look at the people that are saying freedom, they either 100% are just perpetuating that word. They're just parroting that word. Or they're saying freedom, but what they really want is absolution from accountability, is how that word is really being used. And to do that narrative, because I just got to bash on colonialism in America just a little bit more, because otherwise it won't be right. When January 6th happened and the people breached the Capitol building, and everyone was like, that's not what America is about. And I'm like, the hell it ain't. That's exactly what America is about. It's about doing what the fuck ever, regardless of what the fuck ever, because that's what they wanted to do. They just did what they wanted, regardless of everything else. That is exactly Americana. That is exactly ego. That is exactly what we're talking about. Want without context. Want without their own well-being. Want without the well-being of anything else. Total disconnect. Total psychosis. Total delusion. And that's the mentality that is contemporary governments in the world today. So, geez, that's almost a good ending. I'm going to end it there. My show, my rules. That's an important statement to end on. This has been What is Ego? Your host, Craig Smith, MyBizGuide, Business of Being Human. Facebook, I'm going to sign off of Facebook and go to the after party with just the Zoom. So everybody that's on Facebook, thanks for watching. I apologize. I was off to a little bit of a slow start there. I've had a challenging last couple days getting everything together. But I think we went through some important points and some observations, and hopefully some things that people can take away and have bigger understanding to the different aspects of ego and scarcity mindset, narcissism, colonialism, capitalism, human behavior, life on this planet. So yeah, Facebook, we're going to go. Everyone on Zoom, hang out if you want to do the after party. And see you later, Facebook. We will see you later.